Silver the Hedgehog, the courageous warrior from a doomed world 200 years in the future. Blessed with dynamic telekinetic powers, this somber soldier is determined to change the fate of the planet, constantly traveling back to the past to aid Sonic and his friends in changing destiny. But just who were the parents to this heroic time traveler? I am GamerGuy7Aces, the Sonic theorist, tackling 25 years of classic and modern Sonic alike. Let's begin.
Hey, hold on a second, bud. What are you talking about? I'm the Sonic theorist.
Haha, well, everyone knows I'm the Sonic theorist, responsible for theories on Amy Rose, Knuckles, Sonic Speed, Eggman, etc., you name it.
No, I'm the Sonic theorist. You must have heard about my investigations into South Islanders, my Chaos Emerald multiverse theory, my Metal Sonic theory touching 100k views.
Very well. Looks like I've met my match. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I was planning on tackling this theory solo, but I think it's time to mix things up a bit. This time I will be going head to head and battling it out with a special guest and fellow theorist. Please introduce yourself.
Hello all, I am the Sega Scourge, the Sonic theorist. Really delighted to be here with GG. I'm wired and eager to help evaluate a sound conclusion for the origins of this hedgehog out of time. Now, while this is a theory debate, we aren't here to belittle each other's theories, no. We are here to remain open-minded and honest, deliberating on each other's viewpoints, offering constructive criticism and friendly counter-arguments that will all help imprint upon you, the viewers, and what theory you believe the most. Your ultimate decision for Silver's heritage.
Okay, now even though we're both Sonic theorists, Scourge and I are both radically different in terms of our ideologies, stylizations, and the way we present. Originally, we planned on both presenting the same theory on Silver, but not all of our theories matched up to say the least. They were quite opposing really. So instead, we will be presenting our theories one at a time, starting with mine, and then we'll leave it up to you, the viewers, to decide which theory you believe to be true. Alright, let us begin. Welcome back, everyone. Now, we all know that Silver is from the future, and his backstory is a sad one at that. His future home consists of a world destroyed, being ruled by Iblis. Not too many people are alive in the future that we know of, and Silver was pretty much raised as an orphan, growing up and being trained to be able to control his telekinetic powers in order to one day stop Iblis. Now, it is said that Silver is from 200 plus years later from Sonic's current time. The reason for Silver to return to the past was to kill Sonic because Silver believed Sonic was the Iblis trigger. So therefore, he went to the past to better his future. So with that being said, Silver's parents are unknown. He was born with telekinetic powers, he's from the future, and he is a hedgehog. With these facts, let us leave our fanboyish tendencies aside, and let us think about this in the most logical way possible. This is something to think about. It's not official or factual information, but it's the closest thing to a logical explanation we can get. So, people have come up with ideas on who might be Silver's real parents. People say it's Shadow and Amy, some say Shadow and Rouge, and a bunch of others, but these are the most popular ones. Now, Sega themselves may have hinted at Shadow possibly being the father of Silver in their games. Notice in Sonic and the Black Knight, the roles that they have are very controversial. Silver played the part of Sir Galahad, Sir Lancelot's son, who was played by Shadow the Hedgehog himself. Certain similarities in appearance, abilities, and personality, combined with Shadow's immortality, suggest that Shadow may be who Sonic Team had in mind as Silver's father. Also in addition, remember that the Sonic game universe is a parallel to Dragon Ball Z. Sega themselves have admitted to this claim, with Shadow being very similar to Vegeta of Dragon Ball Z, and Silver being similar to Trunks. Vegeta is Trunks' father, further hinting that Shadow might be Silver's father. And if that's not enough of a hint, try switching Sonic characters into the Dragon Ball Z world and the Dragon Ball Z characters into Sonic's world. It is pretty much the same gimmicks and storyline, and let's not forget, 7 Chaos Emeralds, 7 Dragon Balls, the ability to turn super, you all get the point. So with that being said, judging by the facts that we have, it's safe to assume Shadow is Silver's father. Now here's the tricky part. Who is Silver's mother? While this one might seem more tricky, I also try to put in facts and logic on what we have from Sega so far. I tried Amy, but that doesn't go so far. Plus, she's an erotomaniac who's obsessed with Sonic, right? I tried Rouge, but that doesn't go far either. She's shown more respect and friendship towards Shadow than her flirtatious behavior that she displays towards Knuckles. So I kept narrowing it down. One reason I narrowed it down was that again, Silver is from 200 years in the future. So with that in mind, unless Amy and Rouge are immortal like Shadow is, this can't really happen. They'll both age and will eventually die within 100 years or so. So it can't be someone from Sonic's current world because of the 200-year factor. But which female Sonic character is left? Well, which female character isn't from Sonic's world? Which female character has kinetic powers that could be inherited by offspring? The closest one to that answer is none other than Blaze the Cat. Now I know most people won't like the idea and will think it's impossible, and I know one of the biggest rebuttals people will try to say is, well, Shadow and Blaze have not had any interaction in the games, therefore your theory is wrong. Well, yes and no. Yes, Shadow and Blaze have not had a clear scene where they talk to each other. However, they have interacted. If you pay close attention to Sonic Generations' ending scene where everyone returns back to the party, you notice Shadow appeared at the party as well, and as the cutscene keeps going, it shows the characters interacting with each other. In the cutscene, you can clearly see Shadow standing next to Blaze, talking to someone, whom I believe is Silver because as the cutscene keeps going, it will eventually show Shadow and Blaze and Silver standing by each other when Classic Sonic jumps in the portal to return back to his time. Coincidence? I think not. But yeah, it is kind of funny that these three are talking when at this point, Shadow doesn't really know Blaze too well. Blaze and Silver don't really know each other either, and it has been said by Sega that Shadow is one of the few that didn't forget the 06 event. Same thing as Sonic, even though that timeline was erased. So he might remember Silver. So, if Shadow and Blaze interacted in this game, who's to say in some future game they won't get to know each other more or maybe even become friends? And also, I wanted to add that Shadow was only really close to Rouge at this point, and she was at the party in the cutscene. Yet Sega had her only talking to Knuckles. So why in the world would there be a reason to have Shadow and Blaze and Silver interacting? Okay, well let's look at this in a logical way, with the facts that we have at hand. If Blaze was to be the mother and Shadow the father, what other reasons can I give to support this theory? First off, let's start with chemistry. If you haven't noticed, both Shadow and Blaze have the same personality. Both love to be independent, both have a duty of some sort to protect their world, they both like to be distant from everyone else, they both have actual powers. Shadow can teleport, warp, and Blaze has pyrokinesis. Also, in that scene in Sonic 06 when Shadow and Silver were fighting, Silver was able to induce a chaos control just like Shadow, even though he's never had any experience or knowledge about it before, which surprised Shadow. So they both have similar hidden talents. As the saying goes, like father, like son. And they both will do anything to get what they want. But now on to the logic. I'm well aware that Shadow and Blaze are different species. However, this is a gang with anthropomorphic creatures that talk, have powers, and they have a human for a villain? Not to mention aliens attack their planet, and they have been in outer space, plus time travel. So the possibility of crossbreeding between a hedgehog and a cat in this universe is more than possible, thus making this theory open and valid. Now, think of it like this. If they were to have a child, it is more than likely and possible to pass down their powers to an offspring. So let's say Shadow and Blaze's powers were to mix. Shadow's strong points is that he can teleport and warp. Teleporting and warping meaning moving from point A to point B via telekinesis. Blaze's strong point is pyrokinesis. Kinesis meaning the non-directional movement of an organism or cell in response to a stimulus, and the rate of movement being dependent on the strength of the stimulus. In short, you can have the ability to move something or control something. Now with that said, obviously Shadow's teleportation skills must have telekinetic ability, and Blaze's pyrokinetic skills have the ability to control her fire powers. So if we put 2 and 2 together, if you were to mix Shadow's ability to teleport and Blaze's kinetic ability to control something, that would mix and basically give us telekinesis, which Silver the Hedgehog clearly has. Now I think it's a lot to think about, but bear with me here. Remember, I said that the Sonic females couldn't give birth due to the fact that Silver lives 200 years in the future, and that it couldn't be possible that anyone in Sonic's timeline could exist for at least another 100 years, therefore destroying the fact that any of these female characters can give birth to Silver. Some of you might be wondering, well, why is Blaze any different? She exists in Sonic's timeline too. What makes her so special that she can live longer than the others? She is not even immortal. And that is true. She is not immortal, and she's only 14 years old. So how can she be the mother? Well, Blaze is from another dimension, not Sonic's, and not from the future. Yeah, stupid Sega messing up their own games and character backstories. So with that said, Blaze's dimension and timeline could be very different than Sonic's. It is a possibility that in Blaze's dimension, 1 year in her world could be 30 years in Sonic's world, for an example. Now, there are 100 other possibilities as well, but we will go along with the theory of Blaze's time being slower than Sonic's. Why, you may ask? Because it isn't the first time Sonic goes into another dimension, and when he comes back, it turns out he was gone for a long time. Sonic Chronicles comes to mind. And since no other game features a different theory, it's safe to assume this theory is perfect. Sonic does visit another dimension in Sonic Rush Adventure, Blaze's dimension to be exact. However, because we are going with the theory that Blaze's time is slower than Sonic's, maybe 1 minute in Blaze's dimension is 25 minutes on his, for example, this theory still works perfectly. Plus, let us not forget that Sonic doesn't really spend too much time in her dimension anyway. So let's use the information we have gathered and acquired so far, and once again, use basic logic and knowledge to see if this theory can be true. Shadow and Blaze have good chemistry with each other. They would get along perfectly, possibly get to know each other a bit more, and grow a relationship in time. Shadow is immortal. He cannot age. Blaze's dimension is slower, allowing her to visit Sonic's world and not age drastically at all, as long as she stays in her dimension and only visits from time to time. As well as Shadow can visit Blaze's world and stay there forever, and it wouldn't matter because he doesn't physically age. Both Shadow and Blaze have powers that are similar in a way, thus if they were to have an offspring, their powers would mix and be inherited by that offspring. Alright, now let's use a hypothetical theory to see if this possibility is true. If in some future game, Shadow and Blaze do end up getting to know each other more and become good friends, this would leave the theory that they would eventually fall in love because they are both similar in personalities, and we all know that deep inside both Shadow and Blaze have a heart. If they were to fall in love, Blaze would be able to visit Sonic's world to see Shadow due to her being able to transport there via Soul Emeralds, and Shadow would be able to visit Blaze's world without it affecting him or his dimension. Now, the reason Blaze can't stay in Sonic's world is because she is a princess in hers, not to mention she is the guardian of the Soul Emeralds, thus leaving her with the duty and responsibility to stay in her world. However, Shadow can stay in her world because Sonic and the rest of the gang don't really need him to protect the world. So Shadow and Blaze eventually get together and Blaze gets pregnant. Now that is just one theory. The story could change drastically. Maybe Sonic's world is threatened and both Shadow and Blaze die after she gave birth. Maybe Blaze ends up moving to Sonic's dimension, or some years later because something terrible happens on her planet. We don't know. There's so many stories and theories that can be made about this. But the point is, it is possible that Shadow and Blaze are more likely to be Silver's biological parents as opposed to anyone else. So, if Blaze's dimension is slower than Sonic's, and Blaze and Shadow do end up in the future getting to know each other in a future game or something, then this theory might be true. The facts are there, and it just seems more likely that Blaze is the best candidate for Silver's mother. Now here are some key points to back my theory up. Silver and Shadow both have chest fur. They both cannot run fast. They are both slow. Only reason Shadow is fast is because of his hover shoes. Also, Silver and Blaze both have similar eye color. Although Silver's eyes are yellow and Blaze's eyes are amber, Amber still has a strong attachment with yellow. But looking at it in the game, you don't really see much of a difference. Also, did you know that Blaze was originally going to be in Shadow's place for Sonic Adventure 2? That's right. Blaze came in development first before Shadow. Although she didn't really look the way she does now. She looked more like Shadow, except with blue streaks in her hair and she was all black. She still had the same name and everything, but Sega decided to add Shadow instead, and then later worked on Blaze's appearance for Sonic Rush, and made her look how she does now. So no wonder Blaze and Shadow are both very similar in concept and personality, which makes it more easier to be able to connect Blaze and Shadow together. Furthermore, did you know that in the Archie comics, Shadow and Blaze kind of had a weird connection development thing going on? In the Universe issues with the Treasure Team Tango arc, Shadow along with Team Dark has to betray Blaze and Team Rose, consisting of Amy and Cream as well as Blaze herself, and steal her Soul Emerald for GUN, despite her having given Shadow a Chaos Emerald to return to his world after he got stranded on Blaze's dimension, trying to get Metal Sonic to join him and fight against Eggman. As the story progresses, Shadow soon chases after Blaze to have a private conversation. He can't stand that Blaze is mad at him and tries to apologize to Blaze, only to be shut down by her. That scene is pretty weird, since Shadow has never apologized intimately to any character thus far. Alright, well that wraps it up for my theory on why Shadow and Blaze are the parents of Silver. Now it's time to hand the mic over to my colleague, the Sega Scourge, and see what his counter theory is all about.
Thanks, Gamer Guide. Alright, so, to dive into my theory. Now, while I'm not here to establish exactly whom Silver's parents could be, as many people seem to do, I am determined to prove once and for all who started Silver's family bloodline 200 years before his future. So, who do you guys think it could be? I'm sure you all have many ideas and speculations already, but save them for the comments section. Well, obviously, in order for this theory to be worth debate, his ancestors would have to be characters we already know well, part of the main cast and such, and I have a likely candidate for the first of two companions that would kickstart Silver's family tree. Someone with prior knowledge of psychic skills. Someone who's interacted with Silver directly and may perhaps be the key to this entire theory. I'm talking about the hot-blooded, hammer-wielding, exuberantly obsessive but all-round lovable pink hedgehog, Amy Rose. Now, while it might strike some as odd that Amy would be of distant relation to Silver, there is a strong and prevailing possibility that she could be, based on an intriguing piece of evidence to do with her character. After all, it might be known to some, but for those who don't know, every profile of Amy dating back to Sonic the Hedgehog CD makes sure to make reference to her interest in magical practices and her hobby of tarot card reading. To me, this would imply that Amy is capable of some latent psychic abilities. Extrasensory perception, or ESP to be precise. Tarot reading is a form of cartomancy, an occult fortune-telling technique practiced using cards to gain insight into a person's present, future, or past. Amy supposedly used her know-how of the mystic arts to gain divinatory knowledge of her fated meeting with the love of her life, Sonic the Hedgehog, on the legendary Little Planet, where the events of Sonic CD ultimately took place. And while some might say this tarot aficionado is no indication of psychic mastery, as her meeting with Sonic may have just been pure coincidence, Amy has been seen using her tarot cards since the events of Sonic CD, in the likes of Sonic Battle, and through her Tarot Draw POW move in Sonic Chronicles, the description of which reads, Amy foresees the future with her tarot deck, cursing a single foe and causing the target to miss subsequent attacks. Amy has also shown incredible proficiency in tracking skill, able to locate a person no matter where they are on the planet, especially Sonic, going so far as describing her skillfulness as being able to feel or sense Sonic's presence. In Sonic 06, she goes on the premise that it's just her girlish intuition that allows her to do this, but perhaps she's just blissfully ignorant to the true nature of her hidden potential. Amy may indeed be hiding some dormant ESP or clairvoyant abilities that perhaps she herself is not fully aware of, and of course, a correlative evolution of ESP is psychokinesis. The likelihood of Amy Rose being of some distant relation to Silver is highly likely based on this rudimentary evidence. Silver did also share a lot of screen time with Amy in his introductory title, Sonic 06, sharing a strong connection with the Hedgehog, aiding her on her mission despite it being of no interest to him, and hesitating to harm her when she attempted to stop him despite his relentlessness towards other characters. So, if perhaps Amy is the threshold for Silver's bloodline, that begs the question, who would her spouse be? Well, evidently that brings us to one of the most prevalent fan theories for Silver's lineage. Yes, I am of course referring to Shadow the Hedgehog. It's common belief from theorists and shippers alike that Shadow may be of some blood connection to Silver based on their personality traits, physical similarities, and proficiency in harnessing chaos energy. On top of that, I'm sure by now most of you are aware of Sonic and the Black Knight's little nod on this matter, in which one of the most glaring and endlessly quoted sources of evidence is Silver's portrayal in the game as Sir Galahad. For those unfamiliar with Arthurian legend, Galahad is the illegitimate son of Sir Lancelot and Elaine of Corbenic. Sir Lancelot, of course, being represented in the game as the doppelganger of Shadow. This led to one of the most baffling and widely debated notions ever to grace the Sonic fanbase, that Shadow and Amy are either the parents or, the far more logical answer, Silver's distant ancestors. Be it that Silver is at least 4 generations ahead of them, he couldn't possibly be the child of anyone from the current canon. And as a little fun fact, we are all aware of Shadow's eye color, red, and Amy's, green. Well, it's beautifully coincidental that when you mix these two primary colors together, you end up with yellow. However, despite all this irrefutable evidence, I'm sorry to say, dear Shad Amy lovers, that this theory simply cannot be true. In February of this year, a YouTuber by the name of Hello Kitty Power contacted Takashi Iizuka of Sonic Team, one of the original creators of Shadow the Hedgehog, and brought the matter to his attention, to which he confirmed that Shadow is not Silver's ancestor. So Silver is not a descendant of Shadow, nor is he related to him in any way. So if Shadow is not his relative, but we know Silver is 100% born and bred Hedgehog, then the next best and far more believable contender for the title is Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, that's right guys, I believe that Sonic is actually Silver's ancestor. Never did I once think it was Shadow. Just as I mentioned with Shadow, the similarities are all there. The personality, a strong sense of justice, the physical features, the shape of his eyes and quills, and of course, Sonic's natural gift for chaos control manipulation. However, there is already a glaring misconception that many will wrongly criticize this theory for: Silver's overflowing chest tuft and Sonic's lack thereof. Now, come on guys. Just like Shadow, I'm sure Sonic is fully capable of growing that fur clump if he wanted to. If the females of the Sonic continuity are represented as having body fur, but then other characters such as Rouge don't, then the answer is obvious. These characters don't just lack fur in these areas for no reason, that'd be ridiculous. And not enough to dispute this theory over. It's clear that some of the characters simply remove fur or hair from these areas for style purposes. It's obvious the girls of the Sonic U might want to do this, but not entirely unbelievable that Sonic would too, being, as I've mentioned before, that Sonic is quite self-absorbed and thrives on image. Not unlike myself, I might add. He takes pride in looking good, and for these reasons he might be tempted to take it down a notch on his arms and chest to maintain that classic look. But a further driving point that might cause opposition to Sonic being a part of Silver's lineage is their vast, colossal, Grand Canyon-like difference in speed. As we know, Silver isn't exactly known for breaking the sound barrier, but he has improved over recent titles, using his ESP to reach blistering speeds in Sonic Generations HD and running at a reasonable pace on foot in the Generations 3DS version and the Rivals series. But the fact remains that Silver's speed has been developed over time. It's not something he naturally possesses, causing people to raise eyebrows when suggesting that Sonic is Silver's great-great-granddaddy. Now, I do believe the gift of an enhanced speed was passed down to the few generations since Sonic, but here's how I think the cycle of transmutation took place. I believe Sonic's original super speed ability would be what I can only describe as diluted with each newborn in the family tree, and 200 years later would have almost completely vanished from their genetic makeup. And while I said his speed may have been passed down to the first few, I instead believe that his speed triggered a different alteration in the bloodlines that would follow. Sonic's speed stimulated the hyper-development of ESP abilities passed down from Amy as the bloodline advanced. But with all that stimulus going elsewhere, it prompted a degenerative reaction in actual physical power and speed. As the genealogy grew, their ESP powers grew more stronger, but they slowly lost their physical speed, until 200 years worth of evolution and propagation later, and you get Silver the Hedgehog, unquestionably a master of psychic energy. Of course, as I mentioned before, some might discredit this theory based on fur or eye color as a defining factor in this hypothesis, being that Sonic and Amy, both green-eyed beings, are more than likely to have a green-eyed child with a brightly colored coat. But that's not necessarily true. Eye and hair color is the result of genetic inheritance. As basic as I can put it, iris and hair pigmentation as we know it is believed to be caused by thousands of years of mixed bloodlines. One gene in particular, OCA2, is responsible for the production of a protein called P protein, a protein found in melanocytes, unique cells in control of supplying melanin to our eyes, our skin, our hair, and more. And through a process called melagenesis, melanin is the groundwork pigment that governs the color of all these things. Variations in the OCA2 genes, called single nucleotide polymorphisms, more commonly known as SNPs, are what cause prominent mutations in eye and hair color. So in short, our colors can change randomly based on genetic mutations. And considering that we're speaking of 4 generations of mixed bloodlines before Silver, it's not a far cry to say that Silver's eye color might end up yellow through 200 years of family. Same with his ash-like fur color.
Well, you've made some pretty good arguments in your debate theory as well, Scourge. And like so, I can't say I agree with any of them. Both theories are very plausible, but in my mind, the most far-fetched theory is the idea that Sonic is Silver's ancestor. Not trying to state Sonic 06 is canon, but wasn't Silver trying to kill Sonic throughout most of that game? If Silver succeeded, he would have inadvertently wiped out his entire lineage. And I know you may say that that's what Mephiles wanted to achieve since he was toying with everyone in the game, except that Mephiles did kill Sonic towards the end. That alone should have made Silver vanish like Marty McFly almost did in Back to the Future. Also, Iizuka may have made a statement about Shadow not being Silver's father, but if there's another thing Sonic and Dragon Ball Z have in similarities is that there's no consistency in their continuity. Just like Toriyama, Iizuka has contradicted himself many times before about Sonic lore, and Shadow the Hedgehog the video game is definitely one of them, filled with tons of plot holes, inconsistencies, and the forced plot line of the Black Arms that don't even follow the original plot of Shadow in Sonic Adventure 2. No wonder Sonic 06 was supposed to be a soft reboot for the franchise. Also, in the Shadow theory, when I said he suffered from false memory syndrome, my friend Husky Z and I didn't even use the game Shadow the Hedgehog as part of the theory, because that game is as non-canon as Sonic 06 is. Also, I do remember avoiding the Archie Sonic comics back when I started doing these theories, but these comics are based on the Sonic universe and are approved by Sega, so they should be treated as such. Some fans tend to alienate them, when in fact the comics tell a better story and have better developed characters than the video games themselves. So if Sonic and Princess Sally can marry and have children in the comics, then the same can be applied in the games. Also, like DBZ, a Saiyan can marry a human being and still pass his Super Saiyan powers and features to his offspring. So with Shadow being like Vegeta and Silver being like Trunks, this is possible. The comparisons speak for themselves. Well, it looks like we're just not going to see eye to eye on this one. So what do you guys think? Which theory do you find the most believable? Are you Team Gamer Guide or Team Scourge? Remember, there's honestly no right or wrong answer, and at the end of the day, all the theories we make are clearly based on speculation and interpretations, which are mostly backed up by evidence shown throughout the Sonic series. We do not state these as 100% facts, and the only people who are in control of that are the creators at Sega themselves.
Well, in between our disagreements, we've both made pretty substantial arguments, and a lot of really solidified points were brought to light about Silver's potentially hidden genesis. No, not the console, I mean how he came to be. And as a shameless plug, although I'm sure GG would underline this himself, if you guys are at all interested in hearing me cover some more wild Sonic the Hedgehog theories, conspiracies, and speculation, then go ahead and head over to my channel. Links will be provided. May I recommend my theory concerning Metal Sonic's true origins, or perhaps my theory on the unsolved mystery of how Sonic can survive in space? All this and more coming soon, but until then, I have been the Sega Scourge, the Sonic Theorist. Thanks for having me, Mr. 7 Aces, and now I guess it's just up to the viewers to reach their verdict.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the theory debate. And please be sure to subscribe to my good friend the Sega Scourge's channel. He just started doing Sonic theories in January this year, and he definitely adds his own unique style on it. I even jokingly told him that his theories delve more into the biology, physics aspects of the Sonic universe, whereas mine are more about the psychology and mental diagnosis aspects of the Sonic youth. We're like the yin and yang of Sonic theories. Well, thanks for watching, and see you all in the next episode.